Welcome and greetings. This lecture will be on the abolition of man. Um, this book right here. Chances are your version is different. We are going to look at the three sections on the abolition of man. Book 1, which you will find on lesson 12, then book 2, lesson 13, and then book 3, lesson 14. After those three segments, we will move on to the Great Divorce and see how that goes. Okay. In the abolition of man, follow along on the slide that I will have uploaded for you on Moodle. So we begin first of all with the contention that Lewis makes in his book, that objective reality, especially morality, seems to be in danger. What exactly is he saying here? He says that if you look at the world today, there's a widespread modern assumption about objective reality, and it is this, that value judgments do not necessarily reflect any objective reality. What does he mean by that? He simply means that, for example, when you're talking about morality, when you're talking about ethics, when you're talking about right and wrong, there is no such thing as an objective right or an objective wrong, or you will not find that kind of idea encapsulated in some kind of an objective way. And when we say that it is objective, we mean that all people can access it rationally. When something is relative, when something is subjective, it means, for example, that only you can access it. So, for example, if we say that morality is subjective, we basically mean by that claim that morality is how you think it should be. In other words, you decide for yourself subjectively whether there's such a thing as good or evil. So when you're talking about the claim that value judgments do not reflect any objective reality, we are speaking about that in a subjective sense. In other words, value judgments are a matter of your own personal opinion. Something is good only if it is good for you. So here is an example. The authors of an English textbook teach that our use of language involves continual confusion. For we often seem to say something very important about something, but actually, we only say something about our own feelings. What is the author saying that Lewis is referring to? In other words, he's saying that if you say that something is good, you're really saying that I feel such a thing is good. If you say that something is bad, you're really saying I feel such a thing is bad. In other words, morality or value judgments have been reduced to feelings. So if something or an experience excites some good feelings in your life, then that experience is good for you. If it excites some pleasure in your life, then that thing is good for you. This is the view that Lewis seems to be attacking here. So, for example, suppose you say that a certain waterfall is sublime. When you say that a waterfall is sublime, that is to say, I feel the waterfall is sublime. It's not to say that the waterfall is sublime objectively. You're just expressing your feelings. Now, an objection has been raised here. If you go to the next slide, it will be slide number 3. The authors failed to do, according to Lewis, the authors failed to do what they might be expected to do. They failed to discuss the differences between good ways to express emotions, bad ways to express emotions, and also they invariably approach feelings as only feelings. They then breed a general contempt or suspicion towards sentiment, and this may not be their intention. They may admit that a good education should build some sentiments and destroy others. But it is the debunking side of their work which will really tell, according to Lewis. Now, I might have given you a list of how philosophers view morality. And I think, if I remember correctly, I could be wrong about this, I did share with you that if you look at Plato, Aristotle, Aquinas, Augustine, Hume, Hobbes, and all those thinkers, some think of morality as having come from reason. Others think of morality as something that comes from feelings. David Hume was such a thinker. He felt that morality comes from feelings. And it does seem to be the case that Lewis here is attacking a view that was adumbrated by Lewis himself. Now, if morality has been reduced to feelings, or if value judgments have been reduced to feelings, it doesn't seem as if we have much to work with here. So Lewis is taking us to slide number 4, the state of emotions on value. Do emotions really play a major role in determining what is good or bad, or in helping us determine value judgments? According to Lewis, going to slide number 4, until quite recently, humans believed that their emotional response to outside realities could be either true or false to those realities. True emotions were reflections of objective value. Emotions did not supplant reason, they could conform to reason, and ought to be trained to conform to reason. Educating children included training them to have the right emotional responses and get rid of wrong ones. And in this way, they would not have to rely on reason in pursuit of goodness, beauty, and truth. For reason by itself moves nothing. I can almost see a Humean bent to that kind of reasoning. To what extent do emotions play a role in helping us decide one thing or another? David Hume said, in every sense. Morality comes from sentiment. Morality comes from emotions. Morality comes from feelings. If something feels good, do it. It feels bad. If it feels bad, set it aside. Don't pursue that course of action. That's what David Hume seemed to suggest, at least according to how I have read Hume. Now, Lewis doesn't think that emotions plays every bit of role in legislating morality. Yes, emotions may feature at some point, feelings may feature at some point, but they do not necessarily play every role in the manner that Hume wants it to be believed. But reason in and of itself doesn't play every role at all. All the roles you can master, because Lewis thinks that yes, you may know that something is right, you may know that something is wrong through reason, but reason doesn't have the motivation to get you going, to make you move from point A to point B in order to make a certain ethical action, or in order for you to follow a certain course of action. So Lewis seems to suggest that both seem to play a certain role in morality, as we shall see later. But the problem with the Humean view, according to Lewis, is this. The new outlook fails to recognize one thing. Human sentiment could ever be congruent or incongruent to outside realities. Sentiment cannot be reasonable or even unreasonable. Emotions appear to be mere mists between us and the world of objective facts. It is a world without one trace of value. So the options are these. Modern educators are thus faced with a choice between two evils. If you go to the last slide on that presentation, either try to remove all sentiment from the pupil's mind, or encourage some sentiments for reasons that have nothing to do with their intrinsic justness. The latter procedure would be cynical propaganda. Perhaps many will abhor it, but abhorrence is a sentiment and therefore invalid on the current view. Nevertheless, it often prevails. What remains is the other evil, namely wholesale debunking of sentiment. This, however, is not less disastrous, for it amounts to a kind of amputation of the heart. Without the aid of trained emotions, the intellect is powerless against the animal organism. No justification of virtue will enable a man to be virtuous. So Lewis is saying sentiment and reason need to go hand in hand. They help each other out. Sentiment altogether by itself will not move us anywhere. And then getting rid of sentiment completely will make reason impotent in helping us decide on value judgments. So that's the idea that's being presented on the very first section of the Abolition of Man, and that brings us to the end of that section.